Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I mean, I don't think I've done anything sort of like this before, but it's basically just a top 10-ish list of the most popular books that I have read. So according to Goodreads, the ones that has the most ratings of the books that I've read, I've sort of made a little list of. So starting from the 10th spot on this list, we have A Game of Thrones by George R. R. Martin, the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. Obviously, it's not surprising to me that this is on this list, considering how many people loves the TV show. I personally very much prefer the books over the TV show. I haven't even finished the TV show, and I'm happy I discovered the books before I discovered the TV show, because I'm not sure if I would have read it if I watched the TV show first. I'm not surprised that it's here, and it definitely comes very highly recommended from me as a reader. So I know that this is a very popular series and the majority of people has either read it or watched the TV show, but if you haven't watched either, if you haven't watched it or read it or anything like that, then I definitely recommend you checking out the series first and try to read it. There's a lot of names to get a hold of, so maybe a recommendation is to try and write down names and what the relation they have to other characters. Maybe to get you through the first 200 pages. I definitely had a few issues with the first 200 pages that I read, because there was a lot of character names thrown at you, and you have to try and make sure you followed along with who was who and who belonged in what house and all of that. But I knew there was quite early on, there was a certain type of point of views that I looked more forward to than others. But I still really enjoyed being informed about the world slowly and as I went through the book. And George R. R. Martin has a really good writing style. It's pretty easy to get into, in my opinion, and it's not heavily on the magic system in the first book especially. You have a lot of talk about all of the different kingdoms in this world and the different families and who is important in the different families. And then you have this sort of talk about the wall, and there's something on the other side of the wall that has some fantastical elements, but you don't know what it is and you're not really told about it. And then they have a different sort of belief, like the different religions that they're exploring is also different. So like I think those are the main things that is different or fantasy-like in the first book. But I definitely very much enjoyed it, and I definitely highly recommend it. Coming in as number 9 is a little bit of a surprise to me that it's not higher on this list, but that is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is obviously a very famous children's or middle grade-ish type of fantasy book that follows Bilbo Baggins as he's going on this great adventure and discovers the ring. That there's a main part of the plot of Lord of the Rings, obviously. So I love this book. I cannot wait to get into the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I've never read the trilogy. The Hobbit was the first book I read by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I read it back in May and I loved it. So I'm really looking forward to getting into the trilogy now. But I've also heard that his writing style in the Lord of the Rings trilogy is a lot different than it is in The Hobbit, because The Hobbit is tended to another audience. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm definitely looking forward to reading it. I highly recommend The Hobbit. It's a good way of getting into fantasy. If you haven't read any fantasy before, I think it's a great place to start, because it's not very difficult to get into. The language is quite straightforward, even though it's sort of an old book. It's not difficult to understand what's going on. And the way that he talks about the atmosphere or the things that happens around him, you definitely know that this is a special book, and that you can sort of feel the richness of this world and see it and smell it almost. Like, he has such a vivid description of the world, and I really enjoyed that. Coming in as number 8 is a little bit surprised to me as well that it's not higher, but that is Pride and Prejudice. Although, to be fair, I don't think I ever read completely through this book. So I think I marked it as read when I was only possibly about halfway, a little over halfway through it, and I didn't really enjoy it. It's like the first classic I've ever picked up, and I was fairly new to reading when I did, and I didn't get the language. I read it in English, so I don't know if it would have been better if I picked it up in Danish, where I'm more familiar with all of the older language. But I definitely am interested in trying to reread it sometime in the nearest future and see if my opinions about this book have changed. But I didn't really love it when I read it. But hopefully I will on a reread. And yeah, but I'm surprised it's not higher, because everyone recommends this one. If they talk about classics, this is the first one they mention. So I'm surprised it's not higher on the most popular list of books that people have read. So yeah, but yeah, I want to reread it sometime soon-ish. Coming in as number 7 is Divergent by Veronica Roth. I actually thought that the first book in the Divergent series was okay. I enjoyed it. It was an easy read, and I flew through that book. I sort of liked it, but I read the second one and didn't like it, and I'd never finished the series, and I'm not going to. So it's a little overhyped, but I'm not surprised. Super surprised it's on here, because it was very, very popular when I picked it up back in 2000 and... was it 14? I feel like it was 2014 I read it. In the summer, when I was just getting into reading again. Or actually when I was just getting really into reading, where it's like sped off. Yeah. Coming in as number 6 on this list is 1984 by George Orwell. This is one of my personal favorite classics that I've ever read. It's a modern classic, so it's not very old. It's from around the 50s, but I loved it. I prefer it over Animal Farm, although I really enjoy that one as well. And I would have given it 5 stars if it wasn't because of the ending. I was a little bit disappointed with the ending. But I overall really enjoyed this one. The political part of this was so interesting. I think that it is still, if I think about it, it's scary because it's so relevant also today because of all of the surveillance stuff, and how people can see what you're doing all the time because of Google or whatever and all of that. It's a little bit scary, and this definitely takes up the subject, sort of the Big Brother, where you are being monitored all the time about what you're doing, and it's very, very strict what you're allowed to do. I love this one, but I don't think it's for everyone, because I definitely see different opinions, but I definitely really, really enjoyed it, and I'm happy I read it. I read it also back in 2014, I think. It's one of the first classic type books that I read, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So it's definitely, comes very highly recommended from me. So yeah. Coming in as number 5 is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I read also another book that I also read back in 2014 when I was just getting into the reading groove. This one, I don't like John Green's writing super much, but I definitely did like this when I read it. I was very absorbed in the story, and I'm not sure any of the other books by John Green could do the same thing. And I'm not sure if I reread it now, I would have the same feelings as I did then. But I'm sort of glad I read it, because I know what the hype was about, and I did give it 5 stars at the time that I was reading it. I'm not sure I could give it that again, but upon a reread. But I have actually don't own it any longer. I have I've put it in a sort of storage under my bed, so I didn't want to find it. So I do own it, but I don't have it on display any longer. Coming in as number 4 is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And of this list, of the classics that I've read, this is possibly my least favorite. And I know it's a very unpopular opinion. Again, it's one of those, I'm not sure if I completed it when I read it, and I just marked it as read, and I didn't want to think about it any longer. But there were definitely things I enjoyed about it, but the majority of it, I was a little bored when I was reading it. But it might be one of those books that I'm going to try and see if I can reread. It was one of those books, that I read back in 2014 when I was trying to get into reading, and classics was not something I was good at reading. apparently, except for 1984. But I am planning on trying to get more into classic and get into that sort of writing style. And yeah, there's a reason they're classics, there's a reason they're so popular still, is because they have relevant topics. And hopefully on a reread I will enjoy it more, but I don't know. But I'm happy that so many people actually really enjoys the book, because I like the fact that we can all enjoy different books and have different opinions about the books. Coming in as number 3 on this list, which is in a way very worrisome but not super surprising, is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. This was like one of the series that got me into reading, so I don't hate the series because I'm happy, I'm grateful for it because it got me into reading, but I do know and I do recognize that it has a lot of flaws. But yeah, I read it, and at the time I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it's still rated 5 stars on my Goodreads because I haven't changed it. So if you see that, it's not completely true any longer. So I don't think I'm ever gonna reread it. I don't think it's necessary for me. At the time when I read it, I reread it a bunch of times when I was trying to figure out what else to read. But I'm happy I read it because it got me into reading urban fantasy, and urban fantasy is my favorite genre. So I cannot be super angry with Twilight, and yeah, I'm not surprised it's on here. The films were really popular. It was a phenomenon when it came out, and yeah. Coming in as number 2 on this list is also not a surprise, and that is The Hunger Games, another one of those really big phenomenons in the young adult genre, and especially in the movies, books that made into film franchises, big film franchises as well. I definitely enjoyed The Hunger Games. I didn't love it. I watched the Hunger Game movie, and I think also Catching Fire, before I started on reading the trilogy, and I read the trilogy in like a month. So I sped through that trilogy, and I definitely enjoyed it. I think the first one I gave 4 stars, the second one I actually gave 5 stars, and I also think I gave the third one 5 stars. But I don't know if that was because I didn't know anything about that book, because I hadn't watched the movie or what it was. But I did really enjoy this series, trilogy as a whole, and I definitely understand why it's so popular. It's not the best thing in the world, and I don't think I want to reread it, but I'm happy I read it, and I do think they're very entertaining reads, and sort of the what really started off this dystopian sort of genre together with Divergent. Like, those 2 series were the big dystopians that happened in YA around the 2010-12-ish. I think that's when they come out, and I'm happy I read them. I'm not surprised they're on here. The last and final one is also definitely not a surprise, but the most popular book that I've ever read is, not surprisingly, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or the Sorcerer's Stone, depending on you are American or UK, or in Danish it's called Harry Potter og De Vises Sten, so now you know that. I didn't read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as the first one Harry Potter book. I started out with the 6th one because I watched the movies up until then, but I do really enjoy this series. I love Harry Potter. It's one of those series that I do still continue to reread, and I am really looking forward to try and reread it maybe next year. We'll see. But I enjoy it. I enjoy it for the characters. I enjoy it for the character developments. I like the fuzzy, warm feeling I get when I read a Harry Potter book. It's not perfect. It has flaws. I recognize that now, but I still have very nostalgic feelings about the book and the series and the characters. And I also actually really enjoy the movies, even though I know it's an unpopular opinion. But I think it comes down to the fact that I watched the movies before I read the books, or some of them at least. And so I don't get angry when I watch the movies afterwards, because I see them as 2 separate things. But I enjoy both. but Harry Potter is definitely special. But I never gave the first one 5 stars. I always gave it 4 out of 5 stars for some reason. The first 2 books I gave 4 stars, and the rest of the books I gave 5 stars. I think that's when it changed and became a little bit more adult. I don't know if that will change if I reread it, but I do really enjoy it. I'm not surprised it's on the most popular list, because everyone seems to have read Harry Potter at one point, whether you are my generation, especially my generation, and my sister's generation, read them because they came out when they were that age. I was 15. I was 15, I think, when the first movie came out, and the hype started with Harry Potter in Denmark. Because I remember that was the time that it all started, and I was not interested in the movie when it came out. But then I watched the movie later on with my family, as one do, and it changed things. And from then on, we went and watched all the movies when they premiered in the cinema, and it was fun. And I always went with both my sisters, my brother, and my dad. My mom wasn't part of it because she didn't really like Harry Potter. She doesn't really like fantasy, so she was the only one who wasn't part of it. But we all went together, and it was fun. And yeah, anyway, this was a pretty rambly video. Let me know in the comments down below which of these books you have read. Do you agree with my opinions about them? Are you surprised about any of the books that are more popular than others on this list? Because I was a little bit surprised about some of them, that they weren't more popular. Obviously, there's a lot of books that I haven't read, because I could have talked about the most popular books on Goodreads of all time, but I haven't read them. So I just wanted to see how I like the books that everyone likes, everyone has read or whatever. And yeah, it was fun. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very, very soon. Goodbye.